Welcome back to Zane Debates. Tonight's case, the moon landing. Real, or the greatest stage show ever pulled off? Spoiler, if you want a neat little conspiracy bow, you picked the wrong channel. We're doing evidence, layers, receipts. So let's start with our first question. What would it take to fake it? Let's steelman the conspiracy first. Not everyone's dumb, but to fake Apollo, you'd need to fake all of this at the same time. Real-time communications and telemetry, tracking data that matches a spacecraft going to the moon, lunar samples that aren't Earth rocks, retroreflectors on the moon that we still bounce lasers off today, and later lunar orbiters imaging the landing sites, hardware, and tracks. You don't just fake a video, you fake physics, astronomy, and international observation in the middle of the Cold War. So the question becomes, which is more plausible? A, 6 successful landings, or B, the most complex multi-decade global hoax in human history? Now, let's examine the evidence like the adults with caffeine we are. Apollo wasn't hidden. It was screaming across the sky. Observatories and tracking stations outside NASA tracked Apollo signals and trajectories. One commonly cited example is the UK's Jodrell Bank Observatory, which had a major role in early space tracking and publicly discussed tracking work around that era. And here's the kicker. The Soviet Union had every incentive to expose a fake. If the US didn't really go, the USSR would have detonated that propaganda win like a nuke. Instead, they didn't. Because you can't special effects your way through independent tracking and orbital mechanics. Apollo astronauts left retroreflectors on the moon, basically mirrors, engineered to bounce a laser beam right back to its source. We still use them for lunar laser ranging, measuring the moon's distance with ridiculous precision. NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has a breakdown of how the Apollo reflector experiment is still producing data today. Could unmanned missions have placed reflectors? In theory, yes, but the Apollo reflectors were placed at the reported landing sites, and the timelines match the Apollo missions. And the reflector arrays were part of the mission payloads and surface activity. This is a big deal because it's repeatable evidence. Not look at this photo. More like, here's an experiment you can run again next week. Modern lunar orbiters have imaged Apollo landing sites. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, captured images showing descent stages and even surface tracks. NASA published sharper views of multiple Apollo sites. Also, the Institute of Physics has a solid explainer on what LRO has photographed and why that matters. This doesn't rely on 1969 film stock. This is modern imaging of objects that shouldn't exist on the moon unless humans put them there. Apollo brought back hundreds of kilograms of lunar material. Here's why that's hard to fake. Some lunar samples show exposure to space environments in ways Earth rocks don't. Many were studied by scientists globally. Research on Apollo lunar samples appears in peer-reviewed literature going back decades, including early isotopic work soon after Apollo 11. Modern studies still use Apollo samples as reference material, including recent peer-reviewed work. Could they have come from meteorites? Lunar meteorites exist, but they're rare, randomly distributed, and don't neatly match the mission-specific sample context, documented collection sites, and bulk quantity. In short, faking the rocks means faking an entire ecosystem of scientific cross-checking that's been ongoing for half a century. So this final section I have discusses common hoax claims. Let's dive in. Marcus, there's no stars in the photos. Camera exposure settings. Bright lunar surface plus sunlit astronauts. Or stars too dim to show. But the flag waves like there's wind. It moves because astronauts twist the pole. There's no air resistance to dampen it quickly. Also, the flag had a horizontal support rod, so it wouldn't droop. The shadows look weird. Uneven terrain plus wide-angle lenses plus reflective lunar surface equals shadows that look odd but behave consistently with lighting physics. Marcus, the Van Allen belts would kill them. They passed through quickly with shielding and mission planning. Radiation dose was measured and not fatal. And yes, people can argue details, but none of these are a clean kill shot against the mountain of physical evidence. The moon landing happened. Not because NASA said so, because independent tracking, repeatable laser experiments, orbiter imagery, and hard geochemistry all converge on the same conclusion. Conspiracies survive on one thing, isolated doubts. Reality survives on something stronger, many different kinds of evidence agreeing. Next time on Zane Debates, maybe we pick another impossible moment in history and put it under the microscope.